Good morning. This is Bob Passy again. We're going to talk about something that is kind of at the root of everything that kind of needs to happen for us to salvage maybe the human race, but certainly our society. And that's the idea of change. Um, yeah, I think because we take everything for granted and we're so used to the ordinary that we forget, although intellectually we know, that everything has changed. The world, life is dynamic. The universe is changing all the time. The solar system is changing all the time. The sun itself is changing as slowly is burning itself out. And the earth is changing. The tectonic plates are shifting all the time. Everything is moving and changing. The weather, the atmosphere, everything is change. And socially, I mean, if you look at history, we've gone through all kinds of social changes. We've gone through all kinds of transitions of power. The American society has changed in many ways, from, for instance, slavery and civil rights, even though there are certainly ups and downs in that. But the other piece is that even we, as our bodies are changing, our cells are dying all the time and being replaced. So change is it's just absolutely a part of life. There's no way around it, and we have to remember that we need to change our views of the world as the world around us changes. And for instance, right now, we seem to have taken almost an evolutionary path in the American society that said that economics was going to save us and provide a wonderful future for us, which turned out to be a bust. I mean, it may have sounded like a good idea at the beginning, but it hasn't worked out very well. And so it's just like we have to find a way back to more of a norm, the past norm, which was a democracy. And part of what the problem is we have been sort of brainwashed to think that the only way you can do that is at the voting booth. And although there was more truth to that in the past, in the last several decades, the voting booth has been so corrupted that for instance, our voice does not count as much as the people with the money, and all kinds of things have worked, purging voters, for instance, and manipulating the system, and using questionable voting machines, all kinds of things that make that whole voting process suspicious. And so that we can't rely on that. And they vet who we get to choose even. And last presidential election is a perfect example of that. Many people would have chosen Bernie Sanders, but we were not allowed to have that choice. Other people, the big money, made that decision for us. So the traditional democratic way of changing at the voting booth is questionable at best, and it hasn't been very effective. We can try social change, and we've had some social change, but we need to understand that change does not have to be I win and you lose. Change can take many forms. For instance, as we're growing up from childhood to adulthood, we change in many ways, and our attitudes and our views of ourselves and our views of the world certainly change as that process goes on. So we live with change. We've gone through change all kinds of times. It's sort of like your clothes. When you were a baby, you wore certain clothes, and when you got older, you wore different clothes, and when you get older yet, you wore other kinds of clothes. And even as times change, you change the clothes that you wear. And so we can move out of one ideology into another in the same way. And it isn't like you had to destroy everybody who wore the clothes you used to wear. You just have to say, no, I prefer this other one, and you move to something that's a better choice for you. It's sort of like belonging to a religion and watching that, as you're going to church, watching that church become something that you no longer support. And they're going in a direction that is pretty antithetical to how you see the world and what you think should be going on. You can hear, there's a church down the street, another church, and a church that looks at the world more the way you do, and you can hear them singing the hymns that are your kinds of hymns, and you can walk out of one church and into the other. No one can stop you. I mean, we don't... They may discourage you, but they can't stop you. And so we can walk away from things we don't like and walk to something else. We don't have to get in a fight about it. We don't have to dominate them. We don't have to destroy them. It's like moving from analog to digital in the world. We didn't have to kill everybody who used analog machines after we changed, and we didn't have to destroy all the analog machines. We could just move to digital, and as more people did that, then that became the dominant way that people worked in the electronics area. The same thing would be true with the invention of the automobile. We didn't have to kill all the horses, and we didn't have to kill all the horse drivers, and we didn't have to kill all the farms that produced horses. All we had to do was change to buying a car. And eventually that became the dominant thing. And it didn't require a fight, and it didn't require major conflicts to do it. So we have to remember that change does not necessarily require that we confront, and confrontation and conflict are not the only ways to change, although they'd like us to believe that, because they have powerful things that can easily dominate in that kind of a conflict and that kind of a confrontation. But we can simply move to something else. So we have to remember that we are in charge of change, that we can decide how we want to live, and we can decide the kind of principles that we want to adhere to in our lives, and we can live those things even though the dominant society is saying, no, we really want you to believe another way. We just need to know that we are adult. We need to become adult if we're not ready, and pick up our knowledge that we are empowered enough to make changes in our lives and to make changes in our society without having to dominate somebody else in order to do it. There's nothing wrong with working within the political system, except it's been corrupted, and that is not. It's not the most effective way. And while we're doing that, and it can be valuable, we need to begin to understand that we can also change how we operate in this world, and that we can go back to a more human-centered, sustainable, democratic kind of society, and begin to build democratic communities again. And that's really take change into your own hands and realize you don't have to go through conflict in order to make choices. It's really about choices. We'll talk to you later. This is Bob Passy. Thanks a lot. Bye now.